Feel Good TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Iran strikes U.S. bases in retaliation. The world laughs at Trump. But before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all.
Could have carried out heavier actions against America in the region, but because the people of the Middle East would suffer, the leadership did not agree. Now, as Donald Trump is weakening the United States abroad internationally, what is he doing at home? One of the things that he's doing is he's attacking E. Jean Carroll, who prevailed in her lawsuit against Donald Trump, where Donald Trump was adjudicated in a civil federal case to have sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll. She prevailed in her case. She prevailed on her appeals. Now Donald Trump is having prosecutors in Chicago criminally investigate his victim, the survivor, E. Jean Carroll. Donald Trump was adjudicated to have sexually assaulted her. Now Donald Trump is trying to criminally prosecute her. He's launched a criminal investigation saying she lied under oath in the case. Mind you, a case where Donald Trump was too scared to even show up at his federal trial. I remember he was in like Scotland and Ireland during the trial and didn't even show up. And he said that she perjured herself. She did not perjure herself, according to the Second Circuit and to the federal judge and to the jury, but they are criminally prosecuting them. I just want you to think about how sick this Epstein class is. This Epstein class that's involved in these endless foreign wars, the cover-up of the Epstein files, and now Donald Trump is going after E. Jean Carroll, according to these reports, in a criminal prosecution or a criminal investigation. It hasn't reached the prosecution stage yet. In a criminal investigation, that's how Donald Trump is spending his time right now. I mean, while weakening the United States abroad like this, it's just so utterly sickening. And then he has his henchmen, his sycophants, like Stephen Miller, go on state regime media, which calls itself Fox. And he's like, the American people understand we inherited hell, but Trump is giving you paradise. Giving you paradise. What are you talking about here? Play this clip.
A second point, Sean, is the American people understand the hell that we inherited and the extraordinary paradise that President Trump is building. From record inflation that we had under President Biden to the cost of living going down faster than it has ever gone down before. From unaffordable energy to the great American energy boom.
And then in the ultimate form of projection and confession, you had Stephen Miller say the following. Here, play this clip.
Democrats rioting to defend pedophiles, rapists, murderers, and the scum of the earth that ICE is removing from our streets, instead of supporting the heroes of ICE and Border Patrol that President Trump has dispatched to make America safer than ever before.
And then it should also be noted yesterday that the CDC sent an urgent request to its workforce to recruit personnel to help screen passengers coming from Central Africa for any potential signs of Ebola illness. According to an internal email to staff obtained by ABC News, they're looking for volunteers in the CDC because the Trump regime gutted the CDC. They gutted the Ebola task force. They've gutted our ability to deal with international pandemics and health issues. And now Ebola is spreading rapidly in the Congo, and there's no resources out there because Trump and Musk and everybody through Doge destroyed all of it. So that's what we got going on.
All that Ebola breakout in the Congo is the U.S. trying to get back in there and steal all their resources. They're doing that on purpose.
Throughout the world right now. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. Hit subscribe. Help us get to 7 million subscribers. Thank you all so much for watching. Double check that you
following repeated strikes and breaches of the ceasefire from the United States forces that were recently heightened even further with the American attack near the Bandar Abbas area in Iran, the Iranian armed forces just carried out an attack on an American base that was, according to Iran, the source of the attacks that took place. Iran did not mention which location it was, but they did mention that it was a base. Why did Iran not mention the country that these attacks originated from? And why is this very problematic for the American president, Donald Trump? Let's see what the official statement was coming from the Iranian state media. They said the following after the American attack. 1:20 a.m. GMT last night, Iran attacked the U.S. base from which strikes on Bandar Abbas originated. Kuwait also announced that its air defense systems were activated during the night. What do we notice here? Well, that Iran does not state which country they attacked that base in, but they did say that Kuwait activated its air defenses. This led many people to speculate and assume that the base that they indeed attacked was potentially Ali Salim base in Kuwait. So what do we understand here so far? Well, a few things. Number one, the United States is still using bases from certain Arab countries to conduct attacks against Iran. So far in the skirmishes that happened following the ceasefire between Iran and the United States, the attacks were primarily in the sea. It was either a Navy ship or the United States attacking a coastal city or, for example, an island. Some breaches happened inside of Iran, mostly to do with surveillance. That's why Iran declared that it took down, for example, multiple orbiter drones. But the explosions inside of Iran's mainland were not confirmed by the aggressors. So neither did Israel nor did the United States say that we attacked in mainland Iran. They attacked primarily in coastal cities and locations in the Strait of Hormuz, including certain islands. Iran responded by attacking American ships or having certain air defense actions going on to thwart the attacks. This time, they're attacking a base. That's an escalation in the tensions between the United States and Iran, inevitably, because so far Iran refrained from attacking any bases. What does that mean? Well, that means that the United States did not so far use bases up until last night to conduct attacks against Iran. The second thing is, why is Iran not saying which country this base was in? Although they did say that Kuwait activated its air defenses. It's because they don't want this country to be in a difficult situation, and they don't want to completely ruin the negotiation path. They know what the United States and Israel are playing at. They're playing at the division between Iran and some of the Arab and Muslim countries in the region. They're attacking from this base now, and of course, that's not justifiable in any way, shape, or form. And the countries in the region are responsible for this. But they know that Iran, for the first time in months, visited and met with the senior figures from Arab Gulf states. The Iranian foreign minister and the speaker of the parliament, they were in Qatar. There were talks and meetings between the Iranian officials and officials from Saudi Arabia and Egypt too. These relationships and these negotiations and talks aren't really good for Israel and the United States. What does the United States do? Go and attack Iran from an Arab country, probably without the consent, maybe with, but potentially without. That doesn't take away the responsibility from that country. That country is responsible, and that country is complicit because the United States used its territories to conduct an attack against Iran. However, from an Iranian perspective, they know the whole game. They know what Iran and the United States are playing at. Let's read through exactly what happened with that attack in further detail as well. In response to the attack near Bandar Abbas Airport, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard targeted an American base on Thursday morning. Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps announced that at 4:50 a.m., according to this report, it targeted the American air base from which the attack targeting a point near Bandar Abbas Airport was launched. The RGC stressed that this response constitutes a serious warning to the United States that any attack on Iran will not go unanswered, warning that repeated attacks will be met with a more decisive response. The statement stressed that the aggressor bears responsibility for all consequences. And this comes at a time where Kuwaiti army confirmed that air defenses are dealing with attacks by missiles and drones. That is, of course, following the American breaches and American attacks. So in essence, if we look at the pattern that's happening here, the United States is constantly escalating even further against Iran. So far, Iran had responses that were targeted against the US aggression that was primarily in the Strait of Hormuz or in the sea. Now the United States is stepping up with the escalation by conducting attacks from bases in the region to drag Iran to a response, because if Iran does not respond, it sets a precedent. However, Iran is refraining from exploding the whole situation out of a genuine will to reach a solution. They know that there are many countries involved, and they have been increasing their talks with countries in the region to try and get a deal where everyone could be included. That does not work for the United States and Israel, hence why they're trying now to drag other countries, similarly to what they've done in the case of the UAE several weeks back, to a conflict with Iran, where they would take a role, not just the United States or Israel, in this aggression against Iran. Right now, misinformation spreads faster than facts, especially on
for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, May 28, 2026. My dear friend, Professor Mohammad Marandi, joins us from Tehran, Iran, for his weekly chat. Mohammad, a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you, as always, for taking the time and having the courage to chat with us. Before we get
to Judge. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course. Before we get to specifics, and there is some breaking news in light of allegations made by President Trump yesterday, life in Tehran today, what's it like?
Sorry, Judge. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes. Life in Tehran today, what is it like, Mohammed?
It's normal. The school year is almost over, and my universities are going to be in person from this week. The economy is, of course, difficult. People are waiting to see what is going to happen with the United States, and but we heard about the clashes last night. People still go on the streets at night in support of the armed forces and the state institutions. Nothing really big.
President Trump said yesterday at a nationally televised cabinet meeting that Iran is suffering from inflation at a rate of 250% and that its economy was in free fall. Now, when President Trump says things like that, most people assume he's exaggerating. Is this an exaggeration? And if so, is there inflation? And what is the rough number? And is the economy in free fall?
So it's definitely not 250%, and it's not in free fall, but there is high inflation. I don't know what the rate of inflation is, but it must be pretty high. Nothing near those numbers. And the economy is not in free fall either, but I'm sure the economy has contracted since the war began, but it's stable. But the point really is, Judge, that the Iranians believe that they can outlast Trump easily. They believe that the economic crisis that Trump has unleashed upon the world will start hitting the United States very hard in June, and in July it'll become really unbearable for Americans. And the Iranians believe that they can wait because ordinary Iranians know that this was imposed upon them. That gives them an extra sense of resilience, and resistance is heightened as a result. And as I've said before, resistance is a part of Iran's religious culture. It's very strong among Iranians, and that's what's helped Iran survive the last 47 years, or that's what helped the resistance in Lebanon survive 47 years. I think that the Iranians feel that they'll just, if Trump attacks, they will be able to repeat what happened during the 39 days of fighting. And if the siege warfare continues, Iran will be able to outlast Trump there as well.
Can ordinary Iranians buy enough food to feed their families, buy enough fuel to power their cars and either heat or air condition their homes, or have they had to impose some sort of self-rationing?
Well, inflation is high with regards to many things, but there are a couple of things that are actually very cheap. Gasoline, and I don't want to give anyone a heart attack in the United States, but gasoline is about 1 cent a liter. That's
1
like 4
cent,
cents.
1 penny a liter?
Yeah. Yes, that's the price of gasoline in Iran. Let's say 5 cents a gallon.
Wow.
So no one is going to have a problem buying gasoline. Electricity in Iran is also very heavily subsidized, and like gasoline. So these are not the costs that are going to hurt ordinary Iranians in a big way. What does hurt is inflation for food. But of course, because gasoline and energy is so cheap, even that inflation is
all right. It seems like there we go.
Yes, sorry. Sorry about that. The connection
No, it's not your fault. Okay, I get the picture on inflation. The president's exaggerations are gross, of course, but he says these things for a political purpose. Are negotiations ongoing between the United States and Iran, either directly or through the Pakistanis?
Not directly, but through the Pakistanis, there were negotiations. And a few days ago, as we all know, we were close to an agreement, although there's always been a lot of skepticism because the Iranians knew that as soon as we'd get close, the Zionists would do whatever possible to wreck the agreement. And that seems to be exactly what happened. After it became clear that Trump would be forced to give significant concessions, the backlash in the United States and in Israel began. The Israelis again began carpet bombing Lebanon like they did after the end of the first ceasefire, when the first ceasefire was announced, in order to wreck that ceasefire. And again, they're doing it to wreck any agreement. So after Trump's statements yesterday, I think that the chances for an agreement anytime soon are very, very small.
I want to go back to gasoline because apparently when you told us what it costs in American money and American denomination, that is gallons instead of liters, we had the internet glitch. So what does gasoline cost today in Tehran in American money and by gallons?
It would be something between 5 cents a gallon. And if you want more than a certain amount per month, it would be about 10 cents a gallon.
I mean, this is just unimaginable to Americans, 5 or 10 cents a gallon. Is this what it normally has been, or has this changed since the onset of the war in February?
No, this is how it's always been. And electricity is also heavily subsidized in Iran. These are not necessarily good policies. I mean,
Right.
Many believe that, as including myself, that these subsidies should be removed and then given directly to the lower classes, because a lot of very wealthy people benefit from these very low prices. But in any
We keep losing you, Mohammed.
case, everyone has access.
All right. You back with us, Mohammed?
Can I change my connection to see if it'll get any better? I'm sorry for.
Sure. Go ahead. Change your connection as quickly as you can, and I will talk while you're changing the connection. So we're speaking with Professor Mohammed Marandi from Tehran, and obviously we're having some difficulty with the internet connection. There you are. Are you back, my dear friend?
This is a different connection. I hope it's better, and I apologize to everyone.
Oh, you don't have to apologize at all. Why did the chief Pakistani mediator, if you know, who's the head of the army, the field marshal, I forget his name, feel the need to fly to Beijing and report to President Xi of China on the status of the negotiations?
I think it's a sign of the times, Judge. It's when you look at Trump's trip to Beijing and the body language, Trump's praise for President Xi and President Xi's the lack of any similar response, I think it all indicated and was clear to the world that the United States is in decline and China is on the rise. And the Pakistanis have a very close relationship with China. And as China rises, I think that the leadership in Pakistan want to be in very close contact with them with regards to anything that has to do with the United States.
Tell me what you think of this. It's one of the wilder and crazier things that President Trump has said recently, in which he threatened to destroy an American ally. Chris, cut number 2.
The strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control
It's
it?
international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, who will have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
How would the people in Oman react when the president says they'll behave like everybody else or we'll have to blow them up? I can't remember an American president in the modern era threatening to destroy an American ally.
I'm sure they're not very happy, but I feel sorry for them because it's not really in Oman's hands. This is an Iranian decision. These are not international waters, by the way.
Correct.
The space
These are not even
between-
international waters by American standards. By American standards, it's 12 and a half miles out.
Exactly. So this is the territorial waters between Iran and Oman.
Right.
And the Iranians are telling the Omanis that, look, we're going to do this, whether you like it or not. And the Omanis are saying, yeah, sure, whatever you say. So they're not actively involved, but they're not going to do anything against Iran. and it's of course to their benefit. So they'll just step back and reap the benefits, but they're not going. They don't have to do anything
Right.
for
Right.
for Trump to blow them up or not to blow them up. But I just think that this is another indication of how the United States is collapsing as the empire, because the U.S. president is basically lashing out at everyone and threatening these countries in the Persian Gulf, the other 5 countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait, saying and Turkey, that you have to join the Abraham Accords. Basically dictating terms. This is all going to cause create incentive for countries to tilt away from the United States, even though these countries are U.S. proxies and they are very obedient to the United States. But it does have an impact, and the world is changing much more swiftly than what we saw before.
Will Iran accept any deal with the United States that fails adequately to restrain Israel, to prevent it from genocide in Gaza, conquering the West Bank, invading and conquering Lebanon?
Not a chance in the world. No. The Iranians will rather have no deal. And Judge, a lot of Iranians don't even want to deal. The Iranians are negotiating, but there are lots of people who say we don't need a deal. Let's wait them out. Let's wait until the economic catastrophe hits the U.S. and then we will negotiate with under different circumstances. Everyone knows that it's going to get more difficult for Iran too. There's no doubt about that. But they are very confident that time is not on the side of Trump for a host of different reasons. So even as Iran is negotiating, and we saw Trump basically wreck the agreement yesterday, there's no sense of urgency here. Many are happy, and the others say, "Well, we tried," but Iran is not going to give any extra concessions. The belief here is that as time goes by, Trump will have to give more concessions.
If Trump brings the American military home, what will the Israelis do?
Judge, the Israeli regime, the only reason why it can carry out genocide is because of Western support, and in particular, U.S. support, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Lebanon. And what is happening to the global economy and the U.S. economy in particular is devastating. And I think we don't appreciate really what's happening. Most people, including myself, economists, those in the know, are saying that right now the inflation that we see is just the symptom, and the reality is something much, much worse. And it's already hitting Africa and Latin America and in Asian countries which are more vulnerable and which do not have strategic reserves. But U.S. strategic reserves, European strategic reserves, they're all running out. And when they finish, then it's going to be catastrophic. So the United States ultimately, whether it likes it or not, whether it stays or whether it retreats, it is going to be in relative terms, a diminished power. The empire is going to be diminished. I'm not saying the United States is going to fall apart or the United States is going to be a third world country, but in relative terms, it's going to be weak. Iran, on the other hand, its control over the Strait of Hormuz is a game changer, and I think Trump and Netanyahu, if they knew what they had done, they would jump off of a cliff. They'd jump off a cliff for what they've done. I don't think they quite understand the way in which the balance of power has shifted. So the Israeli regime, which is completely bound to the West, completely dependent on the United States, even though it has enormous influence over the United States, but it is completely bound to it and independent on it. So as the United States diminishes and as Iran rises, that means Iran's allies are on the rise. And that means the Israeli regime, it diminishes too. And so, and there's also another factor. One is that the world now despises the regime for the genocide, the ongoing genocide. And also the world is going to blame Netanyahu, Zionism, Trump for the economic catastrophe. So the support that the regime gets is going to be diminished. The world hates the regime. This is not good for Israel at all. I believe that this is the beginning of the end. Now, I'm not speaking in days or weeks or months or even like 2, 3, 4 years, but I think that the Zionist project has been fatally wounded.
Is Iran militarily stronger today, May 28, than it was when the war started on February 28?
No doubt. Militarily, Iran is significantly stronger today than it was 3 months ago. Economically speaking, it is significantly weaker than what it was 3 months ago. But that's not that important. The Iranians know that they can manage. But if the United States chooses to launch another war, it's going to end much worse than last time around. And this time around, also, Iran's allies are going to escalate very swiftly. The Red Sea is going to be a no-go zone, and that will crash global economies. One thing, Judge, that I should add here, and that is that the Iranians do not actually want the price of oil right now to go up. They like it where it is. Trump keeps talking down the price of oil, and but Iran does not want demand destruction, a term that I recently learned. I didn't, but so Iran does not want demand destruction. So the more Trump manipulates and the more strategic reserves that are being spent, that's better for Iran, because Iran knows that as demand continues to remain high and as the US is spending all its reserves, that is going to make it much more vulnerable, more swiftly to Iran. And since Iran isn't exporting all that much oil as we speak because of the siege on the Persian Gulf, the lower prices, even though the prices that we see are not the real prices, the real prices are like $130, $140 per barrel,
Right.
no less, as
Right.
we speak. But in any case, the Iranians are satisfied. They do not want to see at this stage demand to be reduced.
Last question. Do the Iranians trust President Trump?
They trust him to be the most effective person to destroy the U.S. empire. And the Iranians believe that Netanyahu and Trump are actually doing wonders to destroy the image of Zionism and to expose it for what it really is. And, Judge, for 47 years, this is something that I know personally quite well. Iran has always been antagonized across the world. The Western narratives have, through books, through media, through movies, through television, Iran has been demonized. And people have always, wherever I've gone, had many questions about Iran. But Trump and Netanyahu, especially during this period of genocide in Gaza, and as the world saw that Iran was the only major player that stood up for the Palestinians, and Iran stood up to the Americans and the Israelis during the 12-day war and the 39-day war, and they saw how the Iranian people were, with the government, with the state, contrary to Western media narratives. Iran's image across the world has evolved dramatically. And so Trump and Netanyahu have succeeded in exposing Zionism for what it is. And they've changed the way in which the world sees Iran. I once introduced a book to you on your show, Going to Tehran by Flint and Hilary Leverett. I really advise people to read that alongside Alistair Crook's book, Resistance. To get a better idea of the reality of Iran. I think now is the time for people to better understand Iran, because I think in the years ahead, Iran is going to be a much more important player and actor on the world stage. And I think that ordinary Americans, if they begin to better understand the country in future, post-Trump, post-Netanyahu, I think there will hopefully be opportunities for the two people to move closer to each other.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, always a pleasure. Thank you for your courage and your intellectual honesty, my dear friend. Be well. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for your courage, your intellectual honesty, and God be with you.
Thank you. Coming up later today at 9:15 this morning, the Golden Boy, about 45 minutes from now, if you're watching us live, Max Blumenthal at 11 this morning, Pepe Escobar at 2:15 this afternoon, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, and the cleanup hitter at 3 o'clock, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
Priests of cynicism. Mark Svoboda, let's talk. For us cynics, for the junior and senior cynic. The terms that are being used is gloves off, but I don't think it's completely accurate for this reason. Gloves off kind of implies some guy just goes crazy and just starts throwing punches, you know what I mean, like a madman. Where Russia, even in the gloves off mentality, is still very calculated. But I do get a feeling that there's a feeling of, some people call it anger. I think that's appropriate in Russia, but I think it's also one of determination, of one of, boy, you done pissed us off now and we ain't playing around. Anyway, your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I don't think any gloves are off.
Okay, go. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So I mean, there has been announced that there is going to be systematic targeting in Kiev, right, in the Kiev regime's capital, in the area of Ukraine that they control. But that was walked back by the Russian presidential spokesman. Systematic means, well, not all the time. It means periodical. Okay. I mean, Russia's periodically hit Kiev for, once or twice a week for quite some.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Judge. And greetings from Shanghai. My last night, and this has been epic.
Oh, glad to hear that, my friend. Why did the chief Pakistani mediator, who happens to be the head of the Pakistani army, which is the power base in Pakistan, the mediator between the U.S. and Iran, report on the mediations in person to President Xi in China?
Because China is the guarantor of everything that Pakistan is mediating. I'm not sure this is well understood in Washington or across the Beltway. Everything that Pakistan is doing, and it's a Sisyphean task of trying to bridge the gap between the Trump administration, the Gulf petromonarchies, Iran, and of course, China in the background. It's not an act, on the contrary. Earlier this week, we had a very, very important meeting in Beijing after Xi and Trump and after Xi and Putin. This was before Xi and a high-level Pakistani delegation. The Prime Minister, Field Marshal Asim Munir, their foreign minister, everybody was there. Of course, they were discussing many issues, including the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of the Belt and Road Initiative and all that. But the most important thing was, of course, the Pakistani mediation with Iran. And of course, the Chinese were listening face-to-face from Asim Munir, what he has been discussing with the Iranians and his mediating efforts with the Americans. This is the most important geopolitical alliance at the moment, trying to solve the Iran riddle, the Iran-US riddle. It's the Pakistani mediation totally backed up by China.
Does any deal between the U.S. and Pakistan require the de facto, not de jure, the de facto approval of China and Russia?
Of course. And in fact, this is what the interlocking strategic partnerships between Iran, Russia, and China have been discussing face to face in these past meetings. And of course, with the Pakistani input, including this Pakistani trip to Beijing, that the guarantors of a possible post-memorandum of understanding negotiation, which the negotiators, they say this could last between 30 and 60 days. It could be much, much longer than that. But this is their, I would say, optimistic assumption. The guarantors from the Iranian side are going to be China and Russia. And this is something that the Trump administration has to be, first of all, has to understand the geopolitical and diplomatic and military implications, and understand that Iran is not negotiating by itself. Iran is negotiating from the point of view of an alliance of three top BRICS nations: Iran, Russia, and China. And apparently, to say that being very diplomatic is still, they still don't get it in Washington.
Will Iran agree to any deal with the United States that fails to restrain Israel from slaughtering civilians, innocents, and stealing land in Gaza, West Bank, and Lebanon?
Absolutely not. And that's one of the main problems, Judge, of the road, the path towards the memorandum of understanding, which something that could be signed in the next few days or until middle of next week, let's put it this way. And then the negotiations leading to a possible final deal. Iran has been saying over and over again from the beginning, first of all, our number one demand: all wars in West Asia have to cease. This means the war by Israel and US against Iran, and the war of Israel and US against the axis of resistance as a whole, including, of course, in Lebanon, where, as we speak, the Israelis are once again bombing everything in sight in southern Lebanon, completely illegally, against any formal or informal basis of international law. And there's not a peep from the so-called international community, much less the UN. So this is a number one condition. All wars have to cease. And that includes, of course, the Israeli war against Lebanon. The problem is, even assuming we would get to a negotiation, a direct negotiation, after the memorandum of understanding between US and Iran, what if Israel continues to attack and kill civilians all over the place across southern Lebanon?
Which you know they will.
which we all know, Judge, they will. So what will be, and this is something that I pose, this is a question that I pose directly to some of the negotiators. My last column, I built the column based on inputs from China, Pakistan, and Iran. And after that, after I published the column, I asked 3 questions to the negotiators on the table, and my sources told me, look, they answer your questions in an indirect way. But one of the key questions was, even assuming we get to the path towards a deal, a possible deal after the memorandum of understanding, what if Israel continues to attack Lebanon? The Iranians can tell the US, look, this is a completely different story. This is not between us and you. This is between us and Lebanon. So we're going to take care of it our own way. And what will be the response of the Trump administration? Nobody can answer this question.
Well, who could restrain Israel? Can Trump restrain Netanyahu? Trump famously said, I think we played this clip for you last week, Netanyahu will do whatever I want him to. He said it twice in a brief, about 30-second clip. Is that true? Or is it the other way around, that Trump will do whatever Netanyahu wants him to do?
You're absolutely right, Judge. It's the other way around. And everybody knows that. I would say everybody from the Beltway and Washington and the Atlanticist coalitions to camels plying the ancient Silk Roads in Central Asia. Everybody knows that. Nothing can restrain Israel. And that's the problem. Because the whole global economy, for that matter, all of us and the whole global economy and the American economy, everybody is hostage to those lunatics running a state that is not a state, that is constantly expanding their borders. And their main strategy, short and long term, is to bomb the hell out of everyone they consider their enemies and annex lands that don't belong to them. The only possible restraining order against this regime would be, I would say, a devastating military victory against them. And the only ones who can pull that off is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
So you are effectively saying that all this negotiation, whoever's doing it, I don't know if Witkoff and Kushner are involved, if the president himself is doing it because he's such a micromanager. All these negotiations are for naught because of the inability to control Israel. Suppose Trump were to say to Netanyahu, that's it. No more money, no more military equipment. Would that restrain Israel?
No, it won't, Judge, because this goes way beyond Trump. Trump is just a messenger. Trump is a lowly grifter and a lowly messenger. This is all about the people who run Israel, the international Zionist axis, which is extremely powerful, not only in geopolitical terms, but in terms of the international financial system as well. There's no way to restrain them. And of course, they run the show. They run the show. And obviously, it was, I would say, a gift from the different layers of Indian heaven, let's put it this way, to be very diplomatic, that now they have a president that just follows their diktats because of sequential compromats of what he's done in the past, because of the donors that financed his re-election,
right?
Because he's totally controlled by these interests, domestic and international, in terms of the Zionist international axis. And of course, it's very, very easy. It's totally controllable.
Does Washington, in your view, understand the role of China and Russia and the unique relationship that Pakistan has to both in this entire complex process?
No, they don't. In fact, what the Trump administration assumes that they are doing is instrumentalizing Pakistan to get concessions from Iran. This is what Trump and the circle around him think they are doing in terms of instrumentalizing Pakistan. But what's really happening on the table and in terms of negotiations is something completely different. So in my latest column, it took a lot of work, but I had to talk to sources from Pakistan, from Iran, and from China, and then compare what they were saying, and then trying to figure out their overall strategy. And they are all working together. The Russians are in the back seat for obvious reasons. And we all know, and of course, many of your guests on your show, very well informed, also know that the number one preoccupation in Russia is how to tweak the next stage of the special military operation. But the Russians are following the whole thing in the background, and of course, in close consultation with the Chinese. The Chinese, in this case, they are in the forefront. And that explains, for instance, not only what they discussed in the 2-hour tea ceremony in Beijing when Putin visited President Xi, when they discussed Ukraine, the United States, and Iran, and the visit of the high-level Pakistani delegation earlier this week to Beijing, where they explained to Wang Yi and to President Xi in detail what they are discussing with the Iranians. Not to mention what the Iranians are discussing directly with the Chinese, because they have a strategic partnership. So they are all working together as realist, solid, realpolitik practitioners. This is immensely important. It's absolutely impossible for the very mediocre people around Trump 2.0 to understand how deep that is and how complex and how sophisticated that is. And the fact that they have a common policy that they discuss among themselves on a daily basis, and they tweak this policy on a daily basis. So essentially, the Chinese want a resolution. They want a ceasefire. They want the Strait of Hormuz to be, let's say, unblocked by all means on all sides, of course. And they want a peaceful resolution. And they want to be the guarantors of this possible peace resolution. And that's why this is so important, because this is not Pakistan mediating between the US and Iran. This is Pakistan mediating on behalf of China. Changes everything.
What does Trump want from Pakistan that Pakistan will not give him?
Wow, Judge, this is a $60 billion question. Absolutely. He would expect Pakistan to deliver to the Americans a semblance of a victory deal, extracting concessions from the Iranian leadership. This will never happen. Never happen.
And this all he cares about is a way out that he can plausibly claim is an American, therefore a Trumpian victory.
Absolutely correct. And this is when we heard from the negotiators from these three sides that are working together. The Chinese, the people that I talked to here in Shanghai, the Iranians, many of us are our friends, and the Pakistanis, which is something that I went through my old Pakistani connections, to get them on board again. And finally have the picture of how close they are, all of them are working together. From the Iranian point of view, they are not going to deliver anything to Trump, especially because this goes back to, not only destroying the former JCPOA, which was quite imperfect, but it was to a certain extent working. But the assassination it started with the assassination of General Soleimani, which defined the raging 20s, as I label it, the decade that we're living. The decade that we're living started with an assassination by the Americans of General Soleimani, which was the master tactician and strategist of this stretch of the 21st century. And of course, killing Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader, and for nothing, because Mojtaba Khamenei is as straightforward as his dad, and even more supported by the whole leadership of the IRGC. So this didn't change anything in terms of, okay, we're going to undermine the Islamic regime in Iran. No, you didn't. Basically, you fortified them to a position that they were not enjoying 3 months ago, for that matter. And the Pakistanis understood that, Judge. This is very important. The relationship between Iran and Pakistan, there were some ups and downs in the past few years, but now they totally understand, to the point, which is very important for you and for our audience to understand. Can you imagine that the Gwadar port in the Arabian Sea, which is part of the Chinese Silk Roads, it's the most important stretch of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which goes from the northern Pakistan, from Xinjiang to northern Pakistan to the Arabian Sea, the port of Gwadar. Now it's a sister port of Chabahar in Iran, which is 80 kilometers away. And we have a Pakistani port working as an extra Iranian port as well. So we have we have this connectivity corridors in Eurasia, one of them from Russia to Iran and theoretically going to India. India is out of the picture as well. Now totally mixed with a Chinese connectivity corridor. So in terms of the geoeconomic rearrangement of the region, it's just something completely different. People could not even imagine 2 or 3 months ago that this would ever happen. So these relations are much, much closer. And China is behind all that because China has a very good partnership with Pakistan and strategic partnership with Iran at the same time. And China wants a peaceful, stable Eurasian continent. And that's exactly what Russia also wants. So from the point of view of the Trump administration, to understand how their absolutely lunatic actions are leading to this unwanted result, unwanted consequence, it's very hard for them to understand.
I want to play a clip from President Trump yesterday at his, his cabinet meeting, in which he makes a threat to Oman, and ask you what you think of this. Chris, cut number 2.
The strait's going to be open to everybody. It's
and who will control it?
International waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
Why would an American president threaten to blow up an ally, particularly in that location and at this moment?
Judge, I'm really sorry, but sometimes we have to it's mind-blowing, the ignorance and the stupidity coming from an assertion like that. First of all, the Strait of Hormuz is not international waters.
Correct.
First, it belongs to territorial waters of Iran in the north and territorial waters of Oman in the south. So he's lying from the start. And second, typical Trump reaction. I don't like you, so I'm going to blow you, or I'm going to bomb you, or whatever. Come on, this is not even childish. This is beyond stupid, really absurd. And the problem is, because he controls the news cycle all over the planet, he can say these intergalactic stupidities, and everybody is replaying it over and over again without checking the merits of what he said. Right. Not only the stupidity, but this uncontrollable aggression.
I have to play you another president and his mental degradation. You'll appreciate this.
Mm-hmm.
Cut number 7, Chris.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with look, if we finally beat Medicare.
As I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Were you horrified as you saw it unfold?
I wasn't horrified, I was frightened because I had never, ever seen Joe like that before or since. Never.
Or since?
Yes. Or
You've
since.
never seen him like
never.
that?
No.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Wow. So, Judge, essentially what we are watching is serial dementia in different levels incarnated by the President of the United States. This is how the absolute majority of the global South will interpret it.
Yes, yes. Pepe, I have to run because of another commitment, but I wanted you to see both of those clips. Thank you very much for your time. Safe travels. I think you're off to St. Petersburg, right?
Yes, next week we'll be talking from St. Petersburg. I hope
you'll be with a lot of mutual friends of ours. Unfortunately, I can't be there, but we'll look forward to chatting with you from
Fantastic.
there. Thank you, my dear
Thank
friend.
you so much, Judge. Greetings from Shanghai to you and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Safe travels. All the best. Coming up later today at 2:15 this afternoon, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson.
Saying this week, and I've been saying for some time, the United States is agreement incapable. I don't think there's going to be an agreement, a ceasefire agreement, a formalized agreement, especially one that can pass muster in the United States Senate or become a Security Council resolution. Of course, that's the goal, that's the objective. But the United States is agreement incapable. Even if we come up with an understanding, the United States has deadlines. For instance, things have to happen at this point and at this point. And between now and then, Donald Trump will change his mind and seek to renegotiate, because Donald Trump is not in the, he's not interested in an agreement or a treaty. He is interested in the deal. And the deal is a completely different thing. A deal is, a one-way street. A deal is what's good for Donald Trump. A deal is something that can be broken at any time because it becomes a bad deal, and then you have to replace it with a good deal. He can seem to have a deal, but then he finds out after talking to people it's really a bad deal, so he reneges on it. It has to be very frustrating to be negotiating with the United States at this point in time, because we can't be consistent in anything. The Iranians have been very consistent from the get-go on what their demands are, what the requirements are. And Iran does get to dictate because, after all, they didn't lose the war. We did. So that's where we're at. What's going to happen? Hard to say. I don't see an outbreak of full-scale conflict. The United States can't and survive. Economically, already we're in dire straits. Iran will collect its tolls. I know Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, just sent out a warning to both Oman and Iran that this will not be tolerated. But I don't think Oman and Iran really care what Scott Bessent thinks or the United States Treasury thinks. The bottom line is Iran has a death grip on the transit of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and nothing the United States says, does, wishes, desires is going to change that. The only thing that will change that is the United States adhering to, an agreement which it's incapable of entering into. So I think there's going to be an agreement in principle on certain things. whether it's the lifting of the blockade, whether it's the removal of U.S. forces backing off, something will happen. But, at the end of the day, Iran's not going to give the United States what it wants on nuclear. That's just the reality of it. And Iran's not going to stop charging an environmental tax in the Strait of Hormuz. That's just the reality of it. And Donald Trump at this point in time has said these are, deal breakers. So, I think that's where we're at right now with we're just seeing the living proof of the fact that the Trump administration, the United States as a whole, is literally agreement incapable. And I don't think there's going to be a formal peace treaty. Now, I'd love to be proven wrong on this. I'd love nothing more than, tomorrow they've signed it and it's great. It goes to the Senate, they approve it, becomes a treaty, goes to the Security Council, and it's wonderful. I just don't see that happening because I don't think Donald Trump's capable of allowing that to happen.
And it appears incapable of getting out of this war that you said, and I agree with you, that the U.S. has lost, but yet Iran seems to be doing everything it can to remain within the bounds of this current ceasefire, while also showing the United States in this last missile strike toward a U.S. airbase in Kuwait that it has the ability to continue onward. And it's only been promising this since the ceasefire, which was nearly 2 months ago now, was established. So what explains, and Scott, why the Trump administration, why the United States CENTCOM, why they keep on with these, I don't know what you call them, pinprick strikes, these kind of like striking Iran and then pulling back and saying, no, this is all within the bounds of the ceasefire. Actually, sometimes they're claiming self-defense, which is a very odd claim, given that they are instituting a blockade thousands upon thousands of miles from their shores.
First of all, there's never been a ceasefire. Iran would like there to be a ceasefire, but there hasn't been a ceasefire. There's been maneuvering. We have an ongoing act of war, which is the blockade. How can you have a ceasefire when the United States is engaged in an act of war? In the United States, a ceasefire normally doesn't exist with the continued threatening of force. A ceasefire means a ceasefire, not a temporary halt in hostilities while you maintain that you're going to strike at any time. So there's never been a ceasefire, and I don't think there ever will be a ceasefire. I think the United States will continue to maintain, the potential of hostilities at any time. I do think that at some point in time we're going to have to basically withdraw. We can't afford this military posture much longer. Just to understand how bad it's gotten. We've run out of operational funds. So a heavy brigade of armor out of Texas that was supposed to rotate into Poland as part of a rotational force was stopped. Pete Hegseth stopped it. We don't have the money to send them. Donald Trump then came out with a statement and said, we're going to send 5,000 troops from Germany. Congress said, really? On whose budget? And who approved this? Poland is going, really? We didn't sign a status of forces agreement. There is no treaty relationship that allows this. Trump lives in his own fantasy world, which is half the problem. But the reality is we have an unsustainable force posture. We can't afford to do a major escalation because it'll end up very badly for us and our allies. And Trump can't accept the terms that are being dictated by Iran. And so we're going to have this never, soft ceasefire for some time, for the foreseeable future.
And we have now two, and I'm curious on your thoughts about why exactly. It seems like they go together. This happened also last weekend. There's been 2 U.S. strikes in the last week, and prior the last weekend, there's a similar development occurring where everyone was talking about a memorandum of understanding about to be signed. Trump himself, he got together all the Gulf countries. It was about to be signed. Everything was great. And then suddenly the U.S. was doing exactly what it did last night, which is hitting Iran in a very limited manner, pulling back and saying everything is still within the bounds of the ceasefire. And today we have a similar development. Barak Ravid, Axios's and I guess the Western mainstream media's favorite former Unit 8200 Mossad operative, is now turned so-called reporter, says that U.S. and Iran have actually reached a deal, but now needs Trump's final approval. And then Iran has said, absolutely not. The Mojtaba Khamenei has not approved of any such thing. Why do this? Is this market manipulation? Is it something else? What's going on with this pattern? It seems like it almost feels like an information operation that we've talked about on prior shows.
Again, I hate to smile and say this, but it just has to be said. Normal geopolitical analysis is derived from rational thought and fact-based truth. We know politics can be played. You can slant things some way. You can emphasize things over others. But at the end of the day, the sky is blue, and the grass is green. And there it shall be. Donald Trump doesn't live in this world. Donald Trump lives in his own world. First of all, Donald Trump is not your average American president. An average American president respects the office of the presidency and respects the Constitution that creates and legitimizes the work of the U.S. president. Donald Trump is a self-proclaimed dictator. Just go to Davos and you'll hear him say, "I am a dictator." Man who says the rule of law doesn't matter, only what he personally believes in, his sense of personal morality, which is laughable. And this is a man who operates as a cult of personality. He literally surrounds himself with sycophants. That's it. This is a man who has erected a gold monument to himself in Mar-a-Lago, had religious figures come in and pray through this monument to a god. We don't know if it is the God because they're sort of replicating what the Hebrews did in the Old Testament, where they abandoned God and they worshiped, they erected, golden idols to other gods, and they got smitten, whatever term you want to use. Melania, don't look over your shoulders because you'll turn into a pillar of salt. We are dealing with a man who is not well. In fact, I think he can be diagnosed and has been diagnosed by board-certified psychiatrists and psychologists as suffering from a malignant form of narcissistic personality disorder. That's a mental illness that manifests itself in antisocial behavior. And this explains what Donald Trump's doing here. We're dealing with a mentally ill man, literally a mentally ill man. So mentally ill, in fact, that if he committed a crime and was brought to trial, he could be set free on grounds of insanity because he is literally insane. This man doesn't operate in the normal realm. He's all about himself. It's all about the Don. It's all about the brand. It's all about the legacy of the family. All the traditional things that a politician in that level should care about, like the collective good of the American people, the security of the American people, of our allies. He doesn't consider any of this. None of this. It's only what benefits the Donald. And that's why it's almost impossible to, A, explain what he's doing, and B, predict what he's going to do. How do you predict the actions of an insane man? And the president of the United States is, from a legal medical perspective, insane. Go to the DSM-5. That's the manual that these professionals use. Go to narcissistic personality disorder, and you'll see two things. One, I think there's 5 criteria that have to be met to be diagnosed from a distance, but you're allowed to diagnose it from a distance. It's one of the few mental disorders that can be diagnosed from a distance. Normally, you need to you bring yourself before somebody and be examined directly. But through observation, the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder can be made and has been made. And so the president is a mentally ill man.
And, with narcissism, of course, comes a bit of a detachment from reality, or maybe a lot of a detachment from reality. But reality still exists. And one of the realities that the United States, at least the military, the empire, so to speak, is going to be struggling with, this is the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They published a report recently about what exactly is going on inside of the U.S. military that the Iran war has essentially done, which is completely depleted. And here is just a few of those numbers. So we have the THAAD, the Tomahawk missile, the Patriots, the JASSMs. All of these are estimated to take upwards of 3 to 4 years to get back just to pre-war levels. And that's assuming that there are no other wars that are engaged with by the United States under Trump or otherwise, and that's unfortunately a highly unlikely scenario. So maybe you can help us understand these numbers and why the United States, it seems like the Trump administration, it doesn't seem to care. The Pentagon, even people around the Trump administration, they don't seem to care about this. But why does it matter?
Well, first of all, if you put that form up, we should look at it more carefully, because you see estimated use in the Iran war, probably higher numbers than that, but that's the estimated use. And you take a look at deliveries in 2026. That's reality. So every one of those, they used 1,000 Tomahawks. Only 207 are going to be replaced in this year. THAAD, 190 to 290, probably the higher number. Only 92 are going to be replaced. You see what happened? We have a deficit we cannot dig ourselves out of. Do not look at the fiscal year 2027 request, because that is not real. No money has been allocated, and therefore no production capacity has been expanded. That's all fake numbers. It hasn't been approved by Congress, and we don't know if the industries, this is based upon, the framework agreement goal. This is a bunch of guys getting together and just basically spewing out what we want to do. That's not real. And we live in the real world today. Today is about reality. We have run out of ammunition. We don't have any. We cannot fight a war. This is the reality. And this is the reality that's going to exist for several years, because look at Tomahawk, 2030, 2031. I mean, I'm not good at math, but it's 2026. That tells me 4 or 5 years from now, 2029. I mean, again, 3 years, 2029, 3 years, 2029, 3 years, 2028, 2029, 2 to 3 years, mid-2027. Good luck. No, that money hasn't been approved. Late 2026, doubtful. The point is, this is all fiction. This is fantasy. It doesn't exist. We are in a hole that we cannot dig ourselves out of. Even if you allocate the money, how do you, let's again go through each one of these. It's probably classified, the amount of, permanent magnets and other, rare earth, materials that go into the making of these weapons. These weapons can't be made without specific components which are tied to the ability to access the rare earth minerals out of China. China's denying us access to that. So we can't even make them. Even if the money was there, we can't make these. We don't have the ability to make these. This is the fatal flaw of the approach the United States has taken to war fighting since the end of the Cold War, where we basically don't waste them for bombs. Magnets are cool. Don't waste them. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it, but guidance and control. What do you think makes the bomb hit its target? It's not just a bomb. They put guidance on it. What's in the guidance? What makes the little chips do the little chip things? So, sorry, I shouldn't read comments. But sometimes ignorance is bliss. The point is, we programmed ourselves to fight wars where we would intimidate people with technology. That the idea was to make anybody understand that if you fought us, we would overwhelm you with technology. We would come in with Generation 5 fighters that you couldn't touch. We have interceptors that shoot anything down you shoot at. We have long-range standoff weapons that make us immune to your air defense, but we can kill everything. And we'll come in and we'll hit you hard for a week, and you'll be destroyed and surrender because you can't stand up to it. And the Iranians have been preparing for over 2 decades to stand up to it. And the Iranians have been prepared for a long fight to write out all of these weapon systems. None of this took Iran by surprise, by the way. Where are they? Right in between Iraq and Afghanistan. Where are the 2 places where we fought major conflicts throughout the 2 decades of this century? Iraq, Afghanistan. You think we flew B-2 bombers over each one? Yeah. You think they dropped munitions? Yeah. You think all those munitions went off, or were there some duds? And you think the duds could have been picked up and then turned over and reverse engineered and all the components to? Yes. You think that was shared with the Chinese and the Russians? Yeah. You think they added some analysis that fed back to the Iranians? Yes. My point is, the Iranians have watched us fight forever. To show you how good they are, we had something called the Beast of Kandahar. I think RQ-76 or something of that nature. Giant Delta Wing B-2 bomber-looking drone. And this thing would fly. It got famous during the raid on Abbottabad, the assassination of a 57-year-old diabetic. with kidney failure, Osama bin Laden. So it's the system that flew over Pakistan, filming the raid that the president of the United States and those were watching. And the beast of Kandahar flies over Iran as well, sort of immune. It's so high, stealth features, fly over, take pictures, and all this stuff. And the Iranians sat there and watched it. They had a technical team off the runway in Kandahar every day, watching it take off, collecting the signals, you see, because there's a controller taking it off. Off it goes, flying, yay, gets to altitude. And then the controller turns it over to another controller operating out of, Nevada. And there's a handshake that goes on. You click it, there's a handshake. The drone talks to the controller and they go beep, and then they shake hands and they sync up their secure comms link, and he has control, and now he's flying it. And the Iranians are going, thank you, play that handshake again, play it again. Then they send it back to their smart boys who break it apart. They go, we got this handshake. And so the Kandahar takes off, they de-link it, it goes to a handshake, and the Iranians come and go, we're shaking hands, took it over and flew it back to Iran and took it. Do you guys understand how hard that is? How hard that was to accomplish? But the Iranians did it because they understand everything about what we're doing. There's nothing we do that takes them by surprise. Not a damn thing we did take them by surprise, except the timing of a surprise attack that was, shielded by an act of perfidy that, hey, we're going to negotiate with you. We got a deal on our way to Washington, D.C. for finalization. Everybody sleep tight. Boom, you're dead. Bomb. That's how we operate. We lie, we cheat, we steal. We don't operate honestly at all. And we still got our asses handed to us because they're better than we are. They understood us better than we understood them. We went in there thinking we could kill Ayatollah Khamenei and collapse the regime and intimidate the crap out of everybody because we got F-35s, we got B-2s, we got everything. We're America. We're the best. And then we ran out of ammunition. And you know what? That ammunition didn't work. All those GBU-57s, the big bomb that we drop in and makes it go boom, at least 4 of them didn't go off. Guess who has them today? Not just the Iranians, the Russians and the Chinese, who are reverse engineering them as we speak. Every single weapon we fired, most of them don't work. The Tomahawks, 2017, we fired a bunch of Tomahawk Block 4s at Syria. You remember that? Striking the so-called Syrian chemical weapons facilities that weren't chemical weapons facilities. Again, another failure in intelligence. We fired, I forget what it was, 61 of them. 23 didn't work. 23 ended up in the fields of Syria there, intact. And guess who captured them? The Syrians. And guess who they're friendly with? The Russians. And guess who the Russians are friendly with? The Iranians. Guess who has total understanding of the Tomahawk Block 4, every aspect of it. So it could be jammed, spoofed, whatever. The Iranians do. All the things we fired. Most of them didn't work, ladies and gentlemen. Most of them were jammed. Most of them were spoofed. And the ones that didn't, they hit buildings that were empty. We had zero impact on Iran in terms of bombing things. We had zero impact. Well, we might have had like a little bit of impact, but the overall effect is nothing. No impact on their ballistic missile production capability because it had all been removed from the above ground facilities to underground facilities that we couldn't reach. The same thing with everything they do. We lost this war because they're better than we are. Those weapons that you saw up there, most of them don't work. They're too expensive. They can't be replaced. And we built our whole warfighting way of waging war around these weapons. We don't have them anymore. There's a reason why people got mad when I forget what was the name of the senator who basically said, "So what you're telling me is we're out of ammunition?" And they're all, "You can't say that. You're a traitor." But he was telling the truth. We're out of ammunition. We don't have the ability to make the ammunition we need. We're defenseless in the Pacific. We're defenseless in Europe. And we're defenseless in the Middle East.
Yeah, and then now it seems that the U.S., the Trump administration, or at least the U.S. Warmongers, they are once again trying to, and we know that in war, a lot of it for especially the U.S. is to, you use the word intimidate especially the people to agree to future terms that the U.S. is going to want. That, of course, has not worked. And we know that sanctions serves a similar purpose, maybe through a different weapon. And this time around, though, the sanctions are feeling quite desperate, Scott. Now the Treasury Department is sanctioning the Persian Gulf Strait Authority accusing Iran of using the entity to, shocker, generate revenue from vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. How can one sanction an entity that Iran created and has absolutely no connection to the U.S. side of the global market? It's a very interesting thing and feat to try to impose on Iran, but nonetheless, this seems
the
to
key
be
to
also.
sanctions, though, isn't the sanctioning of Iran; it's the secondary sanctions that follow. For instance, any country or ship or whatever that goes through and pays the toll will be subject to secondary sanctions. So that's the goal, is to get people to say no. Except, gosh, Scott, you haven't really thought this one out, have you? Because if they say no, then the oil doesn't flow, and then they die.
Then they stay in the Strait of Hormuz.
Or be sanctioned by America. I think they're going to choose sanctions, Mr. Bessent, because your sanctions suck. First of all, my understanding is that they're no longer paying in dollars, and the dollars are no longer going to the banks in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. That's the way Iran used to work until the United States went in and seized those assets, $12 billion worth. Congratulations, America. You got $12 billion of stolen money that you're going to have to return eventually. It always works out that way. But so now you're paying in yuan, Chinese currency, going into banks the United States doesn't control. Or I think that one of the things I've heard is cryptocurrency, that they're collecting tolls in cryptocurrency. Again, the U.S. has zero control over that. And so we can't stop Oman and Iran from doing this. And we can't stop the countries from paying it because they have to pay it to survive. We can threaten secondary sanctions, but all that does is make people pull further away from the American orbit. I mean, Marco Rubio, who I despise openly, once said the few honest things he said when he was talking about Brazil. And Brazil was talking about de-dollarization and working with BRICS to come up with alternative means. And he said, we can't allow this to happen. If Brazil no longer pays in the dollar, we can no longer sanction them. If we can't sanction them, we can't control them. And that changes most honest thing anybody's ever said, because the whole concept of the dollar and everything isn't about, the smooth economic flow. It's about American control, American ability to squeeze, your throat through sanctions. The world is waking up to the fact that there is a limit to American economic power. Russia proved it. China's proved it. Look, the Chinese were threatened. You can't buy Scott Bessent again. He should learn to shut up. China, your private oil refineries, no Russian oil is allowed to go in there. If they go in there, we're going to sanction you. The Chinese government went, disregard, do the Russian oil. If you sanction us, we'll crush you. And Trump already knows. Last time he tried to over-sanction China, China crushed him, squeezed him to death, made him surrender. This is the reality of it. This is a humiliating moment for the United States, because one of the great economic weapons that we've had, which we've abused over the course of several decades, is now being exposed as literally an empty threat. Scott Bessent isn't going to sanction anybody. You think Iran is afraid of sanctions? Not at all. They've survived under stringent sanctions. And Iran owns us right now, because I can guarantee you, if given the choice of being hit with secondary American sanctions or paying the tariff, people are paying the tariff because they need that oil more than they need the blessing of Scott Bessent.
Well, I think it's a good time now to talk about some other fronts, Scott. I wanted to ask your comment on the Ukraine front, because there have been, of course, in the last week or so, strikes that Russia conducted in response to the horrific war crime that Ukraine engaged in Lugansk, the killing of just dozens of students and faculty, staff. Now there's this kind of very strange, very strange development where, after Lavrov warned that foreigners, embassy staff, anyone in Kiev from abroad should leave, now the Union actually saying that Europe stayed in Kiev to stand with Ukraine while the U.S. left. And now the U.S. is saying, no, they didn't evacuate their diplomats. But we are expecting things to heat up now with regard to Ukraine, because it seems like Ukraine and their backers continue to get more and more aggressive toward especially harming civilians. What is your assessment of what's going on and how it might relate to the United States' particular, maybe precarious position as it relates to Iran and the broader force projection it is trying to impose on the world.
War in Iran. And when you lose a war that sort of exposes certain realities, the reality is the United States we can't fight a sustained fight against Iran, which means we can't fight a sustained fight against China, and we can't fight a sustained fight against Russia. And we're not in a position to support others because we're out of ammunition. We're literally out of ammunition. We got nothing left. So we've taken America off the board in terms of relevance. We can't even threaten anything. We can't even get our act together on troops in Poland. 4,200 aren't rotating in, but 5,000 are going in, but Congress hasn't approved, so 5,000 aren't. We don't have anything. We're literally a bunch of hot air coming out of the mouths of the most irrelevant people in the planet. Unfortunately, there are some relevant people that are doing relevant things. The British are very relevant. The British have been running a very successful campaign, which sought to divert the focus of effort away from the battlefield reality where, contrary to popular belief in the West, Russia is dominating across the battlefield. Things are not going well for the Ukrainians and haven't been for some time now. But the British have been playing a different game, a mental warfare game, designed to collapse Russia from within. Anybody who thinks that that's not possible, take a look at the collapse of the Soviet Union. You'll understand how mental warfare played a role in getting Russians to stop believing in themselves, Russians to start looking to the West as a dominant society, to lose faith in your leadership, to lose faith in everything, to abandon, what you're supposed to be, who you are. That's what happened in the decade of 1990s. Vladimir Putin did a reversal and built Russia up to where it is today, where they're proud of themselves with just reason, and all this stuff. We're trying to break that down again. That's what mental war is. And one of the things we're doing is exploiting the fact that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to escalate, that Vladimir Putin wants to keep this war confined to Ukraine and deal with the limited objectives of making sure Ukraine doesn't join NATO and doesn't retain Banderist Nazi ideologies, things of that nature, doesn't pose a threat to Russia. So the West has been testing him all along. Every time a red line is drawn, F-16s, red line, Third World War, F-16s come in, Russia just responds by killing the F-16s. HIMARS, ATACMS, shooting them down, nullify them. How many times? When's the last time you heard about ATACMS doing anything worthwhile in Ukraine? You don't. It's the same thing. Every escalation is managed by Russia. Operation Spiderweb, drones coming in, hitting bombers. That should have triggered a massive response. Russia just blew it off because they said it doesn't change the fundamental direction we're heading. We're doing okay. But the British have been focusing on asymmetric warfare, hybrid warfare, using drones. Everybody talks about Ukrainian drone operations. At the tactical level, the Ukrainians, I think a lot of the innovation is theirs. But when you get up to the strategic level, this is 100% a British-driven operation assisted by the CIA and in Germany. Firepoint, a Ukrainian drone production company, is look at the CEO. She's some girl with no education who's just a bimbo who was given the job to serve as a way to steal money to enrich Zelensky. But the British took it over and made it something real. The FP5 Flamingo is a British-made weapon, that's fired against the Russian strategic depth, claiming to be Ukrainian. Before this war started, the Russians made a point to Joe Biden. We will not tolerate NATO missiles based in Ukraine that can hit Russia's strategic depth. Now you have NATO missiles based in Ukraine that hit Russia's strategic depth, a red line that was crossed. But the Russians went, we can ride this thing out. We can do this. The same thing with the FP1s, this wooden, drone that flies in and hits oil rigs and all that. The Russians are blowing it off, saying it's not a big deal. But there's a continuing echo chamber going out there, shouting out about how weak Putin is, how impotent Russia is, how this, that, and the other thing. And it's starting to resonate within certain segments of Russian society. And you start to get defeatism. You got people start doubting Vladimir Putin. Now, it hasn't reached critical mass. It's a long way from doing that. But it's there. This latest attack against Starobelsk Teachers College is the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if Ukraine and Great Britain intended it to be this way. I don't even know if they hit us, if they knew up front they were hitting a teacher's college. I actually think that AI assisted in the designation of this target, just like we did with Manab, clearly a school for children, but we bombed it thinking it was the headquarters of a missile brigade. Here they thought, because they saw photographs of students from another college, not this one, wearing military uniform, that this was a military facility. It's not. Those students were students who were participating in a game. They're non-combatants, not affiliated with the military, everything. That's the reality of it. But the AI doesn't see that because AI is not intelligent. AI just does what the people programmed to do. They saw a photograph and said, this school is a military target. And then the attack was sent in. FP1 drones, 4 of them, each one outfitted with air-to-ground rockets. That's the new variation, which means that somebody has to see it because you don't fire air-to-ground rockets in the blind. This isn't a situation where you program in a GPS coordinate and the FP1 flies out there and flies in and dives in where it tells the dove. There's another drone above this. There's Starlink connectivity, we know, because they got the antennas, and it's being broadcast back to a command center. And that command center is seeing the target. So these drones come in and they cycle off their air-to-ground rockets. The eyewitnesses on the ground say, we heard rocket fire. We could see the rockets come in. We can hear the rockets come in. FP1 is a propeller-driven thing. It's not a rocket. So rockets being fired. Cycle back, fire again. Cycle back, fire again. 4 times. Then they dive in at the end because they carry 200-kilogram bombs. Dive in, boom, 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 collapse the building, kill 21 students. This resonated in Russia unlike anything. I mean, even in Kursk, when in August of 2024, when the British and American-led Nazis, literal Nazis, I mean, when I say Nazi, I mean swastika-wearing Nazis, went into Kursk, and the Russians couldn't evacuate the elderly from the border villages quick enough. And so hundreds of them, 600 or so, were captured. They were all murdered, butchered, raped. These Nazis were raping 80-year-old women, filming it. And then they go off and they get killed, and the Russians get the bodies, they get the cameras, and they have it. This is not speculation. This is statements of fact, and that didn't trigger this Russian reaction. The Russians still went, we'll just kill them, kill 60 to 80,000 of them, recapture the territory, and keep moving. We're not going to escalate. This attack is different. It hit Russia at the wrong time, and it basically has created an outrage that cannot be ignored by the Russian government. So what the Russian government did, first of all, is respond with a massive strike designed to take out the units responsible. Remember when I said that Starlink was involved? The problem with Starlink involved is that that signal that's going back to have some guy watch this gets intercepted. And the Russians knew where it was. It was probably being run out of, there's a facility south of Kiev where the Oreshenik hit, White Church, it was called, Bielý Cerkev. Hit these above ground garages, but we know that those were aircraft maintenance disguised on compartment built during Soviet times, expanded by the Ukrainians, where the FP1 drone unit was that was directing this fight. The Oreshenik took it off the map. It's gone, finished. They struck other facilities in and around Kiev. It's funny how people are like, they struck a museum. They struck a museum. They struck a shopping center. They struck civilian targets, except, gosh, it's the Ukrainians that sit there and make the videos that say, the FP1 drone, a great weapon. We're hitting the Russian oil thing, but we don't produce it in a factory, because if we produce it in a factory, the Russians would hit the factory and destroy it. So today we're in a school gymnasium. Today we're in the basement of a museum. Today they sort of openly admit it. Every place the Russian hit were FP1 drone production facilities related to the attack on this school, command and control facilities, etc. That's what that attack was. That's all it was. Everybody thought that was going to be the big attack that does it. No. Then the Russians came out and said, because, again, Putin doesn't do anything in, knee-jerk. Standard response, and then he sits there and he waits, he deliberates, and they come out and they say, that's it, we're done. No more negotiations. Negotiations are finished. So anybody call us and everybody else in Europe going, well, we're going to try and figure out who's going to represent us in the negotiations with the Russians. There is no more negotiations. This will be unconditional surrender. That's it. Ukraine will accept Russia's terms as dictated by Russia without modifications, or Ukraine will die. That's where we're at. Now, they sent out, in accordance with international law, they have to give adequate warning of any attack that may, cause casualties among the civilian population. And so that's what Russia did. They did it in writing. They've done it with phone calls. And everybody's sitting there going, well, why didn't they have attacked yet? Well, because the Russians are smarter than you and me. I myself said I thought that Kiev would be erased. They're not going to erase Kiev. Why? Because the Russians are smarter than you and me. A member of the State Duma, part of the Defense Committee, gave an interesting interview yesterday where he said, because I'm like, take out the Rada, take out the parliament, make it a visually pleasing thing. I said, the parliament's empty. And you want me to put an Oreshnik on the parliament? An Oreshnik costs $50 million. You want to put a $50 million weapon on an empty building that doesn't accomplish anything. No, when you use the Oreshnik, people have to die. Important people have to die. You have to collapse structures that are underground. That's what the Oreshnik does. So when they fire the Oreshnik, it's at a target that is designed to be collapsed and kill the people inside. That means you have to collect the intelligence where that target is. So they're not going to strike until they get the intelligence. The other thing they said is that this is going to take place over time. So it doesn't have to happen all at once. Fact is, if you go back in the intelligence business, sort of what I used to do in the when I was a weapons inspector, you call it shake the tree. But basically, you go in and you do something to provoke. And then in this case, I move in on a Special Republican Guard facility adjacent to a presidential palace because I believe the Special Republican Guard is hiding weapons of mass destruction documents. I can't prove it, though. So I go in there and I jolt them. Then I see what happens. Do cars go out the back? Where do the cars go? This worked like a champ. One place we hit, and sure enough, the cars went out. We tracked it to a place downtown Baghdad, had the U2 image take a picture of it. I went there, and it was an evacuation point for documents related to the work that the Iraqis didn't want us to know about. Shake the tree, make them act, go, and you pounce on them. But this case, it's not going to be inspections that pounce. It's going to be Oreshnik. It's going to be, Iskander. It's going to be precision munitions. They're going to hit the important things, decision-making centers, and command and control and defense industry production. Because the Ukrainians are not going to put it all in the factory. The factories are going to disappear. They're going to break it up and hide it around the country as they are wont to do, and Russians will detect it and kill it. This is a long-term strategy of absolutely degrading Ukraine's ability to stay in this fight. And that's what we're going to see going forward. I don't think we're going to see the massive strike that everybody's expecting. I was expecting it, but I don't think we're going to see that because I've been listening. That's the sign of a good analyst, by the way. You shut up sometimes. We're on a talk show, so I'm talking. But when we're done, I shut up and I listen. I listen to what the Russians say. I read what the Russians write, and I absorb it. And in absorbing what the Russians have been saying, I don't think there's going to be a massive decapitation strike. I think there's going to be a program of precision strikes over time that destroy Ukraine's ability to continue this fight, and that there's nothing the West can do about it. The other thing is the Russians are prepared to strike Europe, and the decision has already been made. Latvia is on notice. If they allow, next week, there's the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And that's where I'm headed to speak. But the day after I speak, Vladimir Putin speaks. The Ukrainians want to put drones into the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. They're not going to. If they fly through the Baltic corridor, then the Baltic nations will be destroyed, eliminated. That's just a statement of fact. And if Europe wants to do anything about it, then Russia will hit them as well. This is where Russia's at right now. They're just tired of playing games. They're tired of, dealing with stupid people. And they're just at the point right now where if you continue to attack Russia in a way that threatens it existentially, Russia will respond accordingly. Ukraine, unfortunately, is going to find out this lesson. It's the end of Ukraine. Ukraine will cease to exist in the state that it is. There will be unconditional surrender. Russia will control the government. The United States no longer has a vote. You remember how Donald Trump was talking about how we're going to have, security guarantees. We're going to have, we're going to control this and that and the other thing. U.S. doesn't have a vote. We're done. We actually backed out. We're finished. And they will never be invited back in. That's the reality. Europe's never been invited in, although they think they want to be invited in. Nobody will be invited in. This is between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, if you could react to this, Scott, I'm seeing a parallel here. We had the Trump administration since February 28th, since the beginning of the strikes on Iran, claim that everything was destroyed. And he said this for weeks and weeks and weeks. Iran's military capabilities, everything, missiles, drones, Air Force, Navy, all of it gone. And when you were talking about the way that Russia is being portrayed now across a wide range of the political spectrum in the West and in the United States, it's Russia is on the back foot. Russia, they even tried to claim that the retaliation is a way to try to convince people everywhere that Russia is not weak. But last time I checked, these wars, the United States, NATO, they instigated these wars, and yet they're the ones who have not won them at all. Like, they haven't won these wars. So it's an interesting thing when the United States, NATO, Europe, I guess the collective West as it is, claim that others are weak, that they're targeting, and yet they are the ones that are stuck and unable to dictate any outcomes in it. I find that very curious. What's your reaction to it?
Well, let's look at a statement of fact. Remember that you don't have to put that chart up, but the chart that you had there before, and they talked about a framework agreement. That's a framework agreement between the Trump administration and American defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and others, that they're going to ramp up production. There's no money been attached to that, so therefore it's purely theoretical. Nothing's happening. That's the state of U.S. defense industry, totally incapable of meeting the demands of modern war. As we saw, a 37-day campaign against Iran has literally drained the arsenal of the West. An ongoing conflict with Ukraine has done the same with Europe and what's ever left of the United States arsenal. Zero. Russia, on the other hand, has been building up its defense industry. It's just chugging along like you wouldn't believe. And Russia's not just building things and using things. That's how we operate in the West, by the way. That's one of the reasons why we don't have massive stockpiles, because you can't convince Congress of the need to overproduce and have 5,000 weapons sitting in a warehouse that may never get used. And if they never get used, then they get outdated, and that means we just spend a lot of money on weapons, because our weapons are very expensive. So we can't overproduce them. We have to produce just the number we need to meet certain benchmarks of training and operational storage. But our operations are always based on short wars, because we're going to intimidate the enemy into surrendering. We don't have any plan for long wars because we can't produce enough weapons to support a long war. Look at this 37-day war. We couldn't do it. Russia, on the other hand, operates only on the concept of long wars. So their defense industry is not just producing weapons for this war, but remember, their military went from 900,000, then was expanded to 1.2 million, and now is currently expanded, I think, to over 2 million. That's a lot of people. Where are they getting their weapons? From Russian defense industry. And it's not just guns and uniforms and ammunition. It's the weapons of war, tanks. I love when I hear stupid people like Jeff Fisher, some retired colonel idiot, who's like, the Russians don't have anything. The Russians have everything, Jeff. Everything you don't have, everything the West doesn't have. They've been producing tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces on a regular basis, and they don't go to the front lines exclusively. They go out to equip the new units that have been created, like the 70,000 strong new Army Corps in the St. Petersburg military district that has armor, artillery, everything. And you don't just build armor, artillery, you have the ammunition that they need to fight a sustained war. So they build up the ammunition stocks as well. This is what Russia is doing. Russia will never run out of ammunition. Look at Oreshnik. Russia's fired 3 of them. The first 2 were experimental models. I don't know what this one was, probably a serial production one. They went into serial production in August. Let's just call August a wash, meaning we plan on going to serial production, but we haven't quite produced it yet. So September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 9 months. Minimum production, 5. 5 Oreshniks. 9 times 5, 45. 45 minus 1, 44. They have 44 Oreshniks. That's minimum production. Maximum production, based upon what I experienced when I worked at Vodkensk, They could probably produce, I mean, they were running out the, annual production for the SS-20s, 80 a year or so. But let's just call it, let's break it down. Let's call it half. The bottom line is that there's 60 or so. The Russians probably have somewhere, around 50, 60, 70 Oreshniks. That's a lot. They're not all going to be used against Ukraine. There's Oreshniks that are set aside for, first of all, Belarus, which has its own regiment, 9 launchers. Each launcher probably a complement of 2. That's 18 missiles that can be armed and fired against Europe. There's other regiments out there. Germany's got its own Oreshniks attached to it. England does, France. The Oreshnik covers a whole bunch of stuff. They have long-range, Iskanders, thanks to the fact that we got out of the INF treaty. The Iskander K now probably operates in a range of over 2,000 kilometers. That can hit Europe as well, also hit Ukraine. But they've been producing these. They've been producing some prodigious number. When the war first started, the Russians, the Iskander was a army-level battlefield support weapon. So in order to fire an Iskander, it had to go up the chain, and an army-level commander had to say, we're going to hit that target. You understand that that is not a responsive targeting. That is a strategic targeting, command and control, command posts, airfields, in support of a larger operation. Today, Iskanders on a daily basis are literally on launch-ready mode with a forward observer with a drone. And he can sit out there, boom, and he gets a target that is deemed worth hitting, troops training, something. He can direct the Iskander to be fired instantly, and it will hit the target. Why can they do that? Because they've produced so many Iskanders, they can now bring it down to be literally a battlefield support weapon. The Russians have nothing but ammunition. And they're, the British just about 500,000 Russian dead. No, probably 300,000. That's probably an accurate number. But the British can't tell the truth because they're involved in this psychological operation. Now, 300,000 is a lot. That sort of matches the numbers that we lost the United States in both theaters in World War II. So anybody pretending this isn't a bloody war is wrong. But the Ukrainian numbers are about 2.2 million right now, dead. When you add wounded, over 5 million. And the data seems to support this. Even Scott Blaber, Pete Blaber, former Delta Force guy in the know, has come out and talked about millions of Ukrainian dead. Because that's the truth. We can try to disguise it any way we want to. The Russians aren't losing 30,000 men a month. It's not even close to that. The Ukrainians are losing 1, 2, 3, 4,000 guys a day. And they can't recruit enough. There's a deficit there. This is the reality. The Russians are doing everything right. They're not doing it the way some in the West would like it to do. There's a lot of people say we want it to end, want it to do this, want it to do that. Russians are doing it their way. Frank Sinatra literally sang a song about them. They've done it their way. This is the reality. The Russians are winning this war. And now the Russians are going to win the mental war aspect too, because they're going to flip the script on the British, and it's going to be the collapse. When the Russians begin this campaign of taking down Ukrainian decision-making centers, they're going to make it lethal to be somebody working with the Ukrainians. Right now, underground, there's a whole bunch of NATO guys, a whole bunch of American guys in there working with the Ukrainians. It's going to become lethal to do this. They're not going to hit the embassy and kill American diplomats. But if Americans have any of their technicians underground in a center, they're going to die. And when that happens, the rats will leave the sinking ship, and the Ukrainians will be on their own, and it'll eventually lead to the total collapse of Ukraine, which could happen as soon as this summer. June is going to be a critical month. I mean, that's why I'm excited. I didn't know about this when I decided I'm going to Russia in June, but I'm going to be in Russia in one of the most important months of this entire. This is the month of decision. I think the outcome's obvious, but still, it's going to be contested. Zelensky has announced that June's the month where he's going to launch the long-awaited drone offensive that was supposed to break the will of the Russian people. 16 to 20,000 drones are being provided by the British. Zelensky's talking about launching up to 6,000 drones a day against Russian targets. The Russians will counter. It's going to get ugly fast. It's all going to happen in June. I don't know if, they say St. Petersburg at night, during, you're supposed to go out at night. They raise the bridges. You look at the ships go through the stars. It's beautiful. I think we might get a different light show altogether, because this is the reality of war. But it's going to be a major month, and I think it's going to be the month that Ukraine stops functioning as a modern nation state and starts functioning as a nation in absolute collapse, absolute decline.
Yeah, Scott, I know you have an appointment soon. I was going to ask your final thoughts on Cuba, but maybe if you, because the U.S. is preparing for war supposedly there, but maybe a quick comment on that, and also if you have any last words before we end here.
Sure. Well, on Cuba, it's just simple. It looks like we're trying to apply the Venezuela game book on this. The same thing, indict Maduro, justify removing him. We indict Raul Castro, justify removing him. The thing about Venezuela, though, is that Venezuela once was totally owned by the United States. Chevron was in there. We owned all the families, the big families. You had the Hugo Chavez come in, have his revolution, and Maduro took over. But at the end of the day, unfortunately for the Venezuelan people, the CIA was able to come in, reestablish contact with people, and buy them out. And that's what happened. We bought out Venezuela. Okay, now we want to put that same model in play at Cuba. Well, Cuba, the revolution was in the 1950s. The mafia that was there is no longer there. Those families have long left, like, Marco Rubio's family. And so the people that are in Cuba today are revolutionaries, people of the revolution, and they will defend the revolution. You can't buy them out. You're not going to buy them out. Are they strong? Well, no, they don't have a lot of weapons. They've been under sanctions and all that. But the notion that Cuba is going to collapse is a fundamentally flawed notion. And I certainly hope we don't test that thesis, because it'll go very bad for us. We don't have the troops to take on Cuba. We can't occupy Cuba. And if we tried to occupy Cuba, we'll get involved in a very, very bad fight with the Cuban people. It'd be tragic for the Cuban people, but it'd also be tragic for the United States. So that's my feeling on Cuba, that we think we can accomplish something that we're not going to be able to accomplish. If we try to accomplish it, it'll be yet another failure for the United States. Now, moving on, just to conclude, as I said, I'm heading to Russia next week. I call it the revenge tour, because, the last time I tried to go to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the United States government stopped me at the airplane, took my passport, and said, you can travel. What we now know, because of certain criminal cases that are ongoing in Russia, is that the Ukrainians asked the U.S. government to pull my passport, because the Ukrainians didn't want me to speak at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, because the Ukrainians were afraid of what I was saying, that I was deemed to be, and we know this is the case, the Center for Countering Disinformation called me the #1 enemy of Ukraine at the time. I'm still up there. The Mir Tvorets list had me marked for death, and they still have me marked for death. They send a letter bomb to my house. Yay, Postal Service, for doing jack shit. But so it's real. This is real and all that. They tried to stop me. They're the ones who submitted a false affidavit through the FBI office in Kiev that triggered an FBI raid on my house, claiming that I was a Russian agent. It's a classified affidavit. I'm still not allowed to have access to it. But again, through other sources from Russia, we know that it was the Ukrainians that did this. And the Ukrainians probably don't want me to travel this year, but I don't think the Trump administration is receptive to Ukrainian input as the Biden administration was. But the bottom line is I'm going. And it's going to be a big deal. I'm really looking forward to it. And after that, I'm spending the better part of a month doing things. I can't say what I'm doing, but I can say it's going to be perhaps the biggest thing I've ever done in Russia. And I go to Russia as an independent journalist. I pay for everything myself. I'm not subsidized by anybody but you. And what I'm saying this is I've got a big program in place. It's about 85% funded, meaning I'm going and I'm going to get a lot done. But there you can go and get a little bit done, a certain level of funding. You can go and get most of it done. Then you can go and get everything done. Right now, I'm at the most of it done point. I would just make an appeal, if people can go to scottritter.com, to the donation page there. If you can do some donations and help me get over there so that I can get everything done that I want. Just today, an opportunity came up. Again, I can't talk about it, but it's a unique opportunity. It's never been done before by anybody. And I just need help to be able to do it, because I have to pay for everything. I have to pay for drivers, security. I have to pay for interpreters. I have to pay for all the video production, all that kind of stuff. So to do things, as this new opportunity comes up, it has to be funded. And so that I'm just making an appeal right now, because this is going to be a cool trip. It's going to be a dangerous trip, but it's going to be a cool trip. And the information that I gather is sent back to you, the public. I publish articles, I do videos. It gets back to you. It's designed to empower you with knowledge and information. So view me as your tool and help me get the job done. And I'd appreciate it.
ScottRitter.com is in the video description, where you can do that. Well, without further ado, everyone, we're going to end the program here. Hit the like button so more people hear this. Go to scottritter.com. You can support his
Let's start with Ukraine. How morally wrong and militarily disastrous was the Ukrainian drone attack on a female dormitory in a Russian college that killed 25 schoolgirls?
It was despicable and unforgivable and unnecessary, but it's certainly not the first time. And what we've learned over the last several years is that whatever Kiev accuses Moscow of doing that is immoral is usually evidence that they've done something and not the other way around. We can go all the way back to Bucha, as I'm sure you'll remember, when the atrocity there was blamed on the Russians. Russians had nothing to do with it. It was a Ukrainian atrocity. So I think this is nothing new, but it's depressing, and its impact on Russia has been quite profound.
And what do you suspect that Foreign Minister Lavrov said to Secretary of State Rubio when he insisted on speaking with him, even though Secretary Rubio at the time was in India? This was 3 days after this attack.
I think that both President Putin and Secretary Lavrov, individually talking to President Trump about Iran, and then subsequently with Lavrov to Rubio about what happened in Ukraine, are trying to make the same point. You have not taken us seriously. You listen to us, but you don't hear what we say. And what we're telling you now is that we are not going to take this lying down. We're going to respond decisively. And we reserve the right to respond as we see fit against what we think are the sources of the real problem. And the sources for these long-range drone strikes are components that are produced in the West and then shipped into Ukraine, assembled in Ukraine. So I think that's the essence of it. And I think the Russians are trying to emphasize that they're ready to act to end this war in Ukraine on their terms.
Colonel, are those facilities in the West, Great Britain and Germany, fair, moral, lawful targets for the Russian military?
Well, under international law, not that anybody in the United States pays much attention to it, certainly would suggest that if you are providing critical components to a belligerent in a war, then you are a co-belligerent. So I suppose on that basis, they definitely could inflict pain on Western states. Now, the Russians obviously are not interested in widening the war. They have exercised a lot of restraint over the years. Remember, everything that happens involving these long-range drone strikes actually involves us. We've actually sent Rivet Joint and other surveillance aircraft to systematically map out every potential air and missile defense battery, every potential radar site, every potential ammunition storage site, refineries, all the targets of interest to the Ukrainians. And we've provided that information to the Ukrainians. This, in spite of the fact that President Trump has insisted he wants an end to the war and is trying to largely disengage from it. It hasn't happened, which once again reinforces something that President Putin has said repeatedly. He's met many, many American presidents over the years, and he's discovered that while many of them have good intentions, nothing they ever say or do finds a way to be translated into action, that the so-called deep state or the federal bureaucracy or the Congress continue to operate as they will. So I think that's also what's going on right now in Russia. They've said, we've listened to this before. We're not going to put up with it anymore.
Can the Russians justify attacking MI6 and CIA facilities in Ukraine?
Oh, absolutely. In Ukraine, without a doubt. And they have. Let there be no mistake about it. They have actually attacked those places in Ukraine. So that's already happened. They're concerned more right now at this stage about the components the Ukrainians cannot build themselves that are critical to these long-range unmanned system strikes.
So I think it was last weekend the Russians fired off an Oreshnik, maybe for the second or third time. My count may be wrong. And it was aimed at factories on the outskirts of Kyiv. What happens if they unleash Oreshniks on the government buildings in Kyiv?
Well, I'm sure they'll level them. And I think that's coming. I think they've put everyone on fair notice. They've announced that any foreign diplomats that are operating in the area should plan to leave as soon as possible. I think that's a pretty clear indication. But I think that's the beginning of something much larger. I think we're finally going to see Russian forces on the ground move more decisively than we've seen in the last couple of years.
I remember about a month or so ago, you saying to me in one of our many communications, you were critical of Chancellor Merz. What are the Germans doing?
Well, that's a great question. You know, what are the Germans doing? I think the Germans are finally getting ready to change the government in Berlin. I think Merz and his friends have gone far enough. Merz's approval ratings make Trump's position in the polls look pretty good right now. He's seen as effectively a shill for BlackRock, a front for international finance that has damaged Germany. He's seen as effectively having betrayed Germany. And more Germans are coming around to understanding that this betrayal really began with Merkel. She was the one that opened the borders to millions of people that are now living inside Germany that are never going to be Germans, don't want to be Germans, and are going to have to be expelled if Germany survives as a nation state. And finally, the leader of publicly has made it very clear that if they are in one and equipment, they can be resold on the black market. So that's number one. Number two, they're going to go to Moscow and they're going to make arrangements to buy Russian energy in the United States. And then finally, they're going to ask, that's also something else that Germany, the AfD, really would like to see go away. Now, everybody thinks that's very radical, but actually all those things are inevitable. They make a lot of sense for the Germans right now. And frankly, they should have happened a long time ago.
Is Merz rearming the German military at an alarming rate?
No. You're not going to turn Germany into some sort of massive military machine overnight. I mean, this is the problem that Americans have. They're easily beguiled. They say, oh, no, we're going to start spending all this money. And after you spend money, you get instant military power. It takes a decade to build an army. And it would take a decade to build a new force that makes sense in this world right now for the Germans or anybody else to do it. So that's not going to happen. But at the same time, this has put an enormous burden on German industry. You have foolish people running around saying we're going to convert the VW factories to tank factories. Now, why you would want more tanks at this point, why you would not want other kinds of platforms other than the sort of traditional World War II tank is another question. But I think that's not going to happen. The other thing is they've got to get industry back on its feet. They've got to get people back to work. They've got to get the foreigners that they don't want in their country out of the country. Those things are much more important. So no, I don't subscribe to the view that Germany is going to be converted into some sort of armed camp overnight. Absolutely not.
Switching to the other hotspot, Colonel, who or what can stop Netanyahu?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, we cannot. I think that's pretty clearly demonstrated on a daily basis. Mr. Netanyahu continues to exercise veto power over anything we do and anything that President Trump wants to do. I found it very interesting listening to some of Mr. Netanyahu's supporters on mainstream news try to argue that this war was all Donald Trump's idea and that he's made all the decisions and that Mr. Netanyahu really doesn't have any influence. And that's perfectly obviously not true. You can go back and look at all the trips that he came last year when he came to the United States. You can look carefully at his arrival and shortly thereafter the war breaking out that we fought. I think people know we are not in charge of our own foreign and defense policy at all right now.
Whose fault is that we're losing the war?
Well, you got to look at the people that drummed up this dumb idea. I mean, first of all, what are we doing? What are we going to war for? What are the goals of our military operation? I mean, those have never really been explained to the government or explained to the American people. What we're doing is we're taking Israeli demands, and those demands are well known. No enrichment of uranium, no plutonium, no bomb grade anything. And frankly, no more centrifuges. Everything's got to go. That whole program's got to go. And everything that we have today inside Iran has to be removed and sent somewhere else, presumably or preferably to the United States. Secondly, we have to restrict the ballistic missile arsenal. And finally, stop cooperating in any way with all of Iran's traditional friends. But we've now added something else, which is interesting because it's the last thing that we can make happen. And that is, we've said that Iran cannot, under any circumstances, control the Strait of Hormuz. And you know, as an attorney, as a man of the legal profession, that possession is 9/10 of the law. And here's a blinding flash of the obvious. The Iranians have got it. We don't. And it's becoming pretty damned obvious that we don't have the military wherewithal to gain control of it. Even though we never did have control of it, we can't get control of it. So the whole thing right now is everybody's talking about, well, we're on the verge of an agreement. We've heard that how many times? 7, 8, 9 times. We're hearing it again. And then we're being told that this will help end the fighting, extend the ceasefire, and then all of these hard discussions will be kicked down the road, as they say. I don't know. I don't see how we get out of any of this unless we admit that we have lost. And I don't see any evidence that anybody's willing to do that right now.
Who can stop President Trump?
Oh, I think the American people could. That's very obvious. The American people stopped Lyndon Johnson in 1968. Go back and look at all of the public demonstrations. And then the polling that was done, and they contacted their representatives on the Hill and made it abundantly clear what they did and did not want. They wanted an end to the draft, and they wanted an end to the Vietnam War. Lyndon Johnson heard it. He said, I'm not running for re-election. Nixon ends up being elected. Unfortunately, he listened to some of the wrong voices in his administration, Kissinger in particular, telling him that he had to do something before he left. And so we ended up in Cambodia unnecessarily. But he did eventually get us out. Now, the bad news is it took longer than it should have. But when you ask who can do what, well, the American people can do this sort of thing. But the problem is, Judge, and we've talked about this before, the American people have been largely insulated from what's happening in the Gulf.
Right.
That's last much longer, we're going to pay a terrible price down the line. But right now, they don't feel nearly the pain that they're going to feel in the future.
Last week, Trump said we're very close to a deal. It will be a ceasefire for 60 days. The Strait of Hormuz will be opened up, and we're gradually going to lift the sanctions. And the holy hell rained down on him from Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, and presumably in private from his Zionist supporters. And suddenly this so-called deal was gone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to happen again, no matter what he does. Mr. Netanyahu and his agents in the United States are not interested in peace with Iran. They want us to destroy Iran. We need to understand that. Americans need to understand that. When you ask someone, what is the goal of our military operation? Well, now we have people saying, well, one of our objectives is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Well, we forget that the Strait of Hormuz was working just fine when we attacked Iran. So how do we stop that? Well, we can stop the war with Iran, and then the Strait of Hormuz will likely open. But nobody wants to go there. So we're in an impossible situation. But there are other things happening, Judge, and this is what people don't seem to understand in Washington. Inflation is rising.
Yes.
It went from 3.28 up to 3.8%. Projections are now over the next several months that we're going to see inflation rise to 6%. Now, if you go to that high based on the Paul Volcker model of dealing with inflation, that means you raise interest rates to 7% if it's 6%, or you raise it to 6% if inflation is at 5%. But we can't do that, Judge. If we do that, what happens? Our entire economy will crash. The financial system will implode. So we cannot do those things. In the meantime, we're doing things that are going to make it almost inevitable that we end up crashing. We know that President Trump, within the last week or so, sold 17.8 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at a price well below market rates. Now, this was helpful in keeping the oil prices below $110 per barrel. But we are also hearing that Strategic Petroleum Reserve is probably going to bottom out in early August or late July. What happens at that point? That's why I say the long-term consequences of this are going to strike probably at the end of the summer and in the fall. We'll start to feel a little of it now, but that's really when it's going to hurt.
And the government will be spending 5.5% to borrow money.
At least. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it for very long. We're not much of a credit risk anymore. And people, the other thing is I was reading people looking at the global economy and understand that, we managed to remove 13 million barrels of oil a day from the market. There's evidence now that thanks to some of these attacks on refineries in Russia, that another 10 or 11 million barrels per day have been taken off the market. At this rate, assuming no change over the next 60 days, no significant change in the Persian Gulf and the access to the Strait, you're looking at maybe a 36% shrinkage in the size of the global economy. Now, why is that significant? It's significant because during the Great Depression, the world economy shrank by 20%. Now we're talking about going to a shrinkage level of 30 to 36%. That's Great Depression. That's where the world is headed. And we're not going to escape it. And worse, I think even worse than that, we're going to be stuck with the blame for it. Right now, you travel around the world, everybody I talk to that's traveling across Asia and India, Africa, Latin America, everyone blames us for the closure of the Strait and the catastrophic consequences for the global economy. No one is upset with Iran. Iran is seen as the victim. And obviously, Israel is not exactly popular. But I think it's tragic and unfortunate that we Americans are blamed for this.
When I asked Professor Marandi, coming from Tehran, what the price of gas is in downtown Tehran. You're not going to believe what he told me. Of course, he translated from Iranian numbers and liters to American numbers and gallons.
Right.
5 cents a gallon.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we haven't destroyed all of their refineries yet.
No, apparently we haven't. So there's a dilemma here. I mean, are the Iranian-U.S. negotiations based on reality? Because the Iranians will never agree to a deal that fails to restrain Israel, and Trump can't restrain Israel. So where are they going?
Well, it appears that the Israelis have decided that this is a good time to press ahead in southern Lebanon, as well as in Gaza and elsewhere.
And maybe in Turkey and Egypt, as you pointed out to me earlier today.
Yeah, we need to go to that next. But I mean, right now, they're clearly in the belief that while we're distracted by the Persian Gulf, they're going to try and finish up everything they want to do elsewhere. If you're an Iranian and you look at all of this, what incentive do you have to sign up for anything that we put in front of them? Where is the evidence that we will stick to any agreement? Where is the evidence that another president, even if Trump is removed, that the next one who comes along will be trustworthy? What can you expect from the current Congress? So I think the Iranians are in a position where they're going to sit there, they're going to entertain whatever we send to them, but they're not going to budge on the basic points that they've made, because they see no reason why they should, because they just don't see any evidence that will be truthful and will carry through in any promises that we make. So I think that's just an insurmountable problem.
Right. Jonathan Pollard, the American-born Israeli spy for Israel against the United States. He was a civilian employee of the Navy, sentence commuted by President Trump, flown in a private jet by Sheldon Adelson out of the country, greeted in Tel Aviv personally by Prime Minister Netanyahu, now running for the Knesset in Prime Minister Netanyahu's party, recently said that once the Israelis finish with Lebanon, they will set their military sights on Egypt and Turkey. Now, A, does that surprise you? B, is it insane? Turkey has a sophisticated military many times the Israelis. Does it not?
Oh, yes, very much so. In fact, Turkey is the leading military power in the region. I think the Iranians would certainly agree to that assessment as well. I mean, if you look at Iran is almost entirely defensive in its orientation. The Turks have tremendous offensive striking power. They also have a martial culture, much more martial in its content than anything we've seen in Iran. You know, Judge, it's tempting to say, oh, well, this Pollard, he's insane. He can't be serious. No, he's quite serious. And I think we have to understand that this is the view held by Mr. Netanyahu, by Gvir, by Smotrich, and large numbers of others, and also by their agents in the United States, the billionaires who put Trump into the White House. These people absolutely are committed to what he outlined. Now, this is not of interest to us in the United States. This is not a vital strategic goal for us. We're not interested in seeing a war break out in the Eastern Mediterranean with the Turks that could easily bring in the Greeks and ultimately other European powers. I don't think the Russians are interested in seeing this happen. We certainly don't want to see Egypt dragged into this war. Egypt has got an enormous problem right now just trying to feed its own population and power its own power grid. So what should we make of it? I think we should take it on face value. I think we have to understand that, yes, from our standpoint, this is Looney Tunes. But this is what the people who are running the show in Israel believe. And the people running the show in Israel are currently running us. They're in charge. Our armed forces are committed to their goals and strategic objectives.
Here's someone else who takes this very seriously, what Jonathan Pollard said. And that's the president of Turkey, Chris, cut number 11.
With the help of God and by his divine will, I firmly believe that this oppressive tyrant known as Netanyahu will very soon be forced to learn the profound and necessary lesson that he so rightfully deserves from the collective strength and unity of the Muslims across the entire world. We are all looking forward with great anticipation to the moment, which we hope will arrive very soon, when we will finally be able to witness this new stance being put into practice for everyone to see.
I know sometimes his bark is worse than his bite, but it sounds pretty serious to me, especially in light of what Pollard said and your understanding that Pollard is serious. And this is a view embraced by the Netanyahu government.
Yes, and I think Mr. Erdogan is certainly speaking for large numbers of Turks, easily the majority, but the problem is he has a credibility issue. He, on one hand, has continued to sell oil and food and other things to the Israelis, while the Israelis have simultaneously annihilated people in Gaza and southern Lebanon and attacked people in Iran. So if you're a Turk right now, you look at that, you listen to it, and you say, yes, that's correct. We all agree with that. But Mr. Erdogan, what have you done? And the answer is Mr. Erdogan hasn't done much of anything.
Colonel, thank you very much, my dear friend. Dangerous and dark times across the world and
Very excited now to be joined by our great friend, Professor John Mearsheimer of the University of Chicago. Sir, always. So, sir, you recently took part in a debate with your co-author, Dr. Stephen Walt, against Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, and Victoria Nuland, famous for many reasons, for being one of the preeminent neocons and very involved in what happened in the color revolution in Ukraine. But there was one particular moment we wanted your reaction to, of your exchange here with Nuland and Pompeo on the issue of Iran. Let's take a listen. We'll get your reaction.
This is what human decency demands. You don't let a radical regime close off the global economy by firing Shahed missiles into nations that did nothing, right? They're firing into civilians in the United Arab Emirates, even just this week. That's just not something that the world can accept. And so this monster is worthy of the hunt.
You do know, Mike, that we started the war.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh, no.
They weren't firing those missiles until Israel and the United States attacked Iran.
Well,
you do understand.
Welcome to 1979, when the revolutionary regime began to kill Europeans.
You do know that we overthrew the democratically elected government in 1954.
Just for the record, you were talking about this.
You don't think Iran has? You think Iran's forgotten about that?
No, I suspect they've
you
not.
You don't think Iran remembers that we supported Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War?
I know
forgotten
this.
about this.
I know this.
Other countries have history.
Do you think Iran is a monster?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think there's. I'm glad I don't live there. I think many countries do many bad things, including my own, and I wouldn't call the United States a monster.
But Stephen, do also remember that we wouldn't have had October 7th if we hadn't had Iranian support for Hamas.
I agree. We wouldn't have had October 7th if we'd gotten peace in the Middle East, and that's a much longer story.
It is, and every single U.S. president has tried and will continue to.
Not very hard.
But it is very important to emphasize there's no evidence that Iran even knew about October 7th, much less.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure it is lovely to live where you live and believe
there's
that.
no evidence in the public record of that.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, the smirk, sir, from Victoria Nuland, whenever you bring up the genuine fact that there is literally no evidence of all of that. What's your broad takeaway here? We haven't gotten to talk to you since that debate aired.
I think in terms of facts and logic that we beat them at almost every turn. And I think that's reflected in their response to my point that there was no evidence that Iran was involved in the events of October 7th. I mean, they didn't say, here are the facts that show you're wrong, or here is the report that you should read that explains why you're wrong. They just laughed at me and made fun of me. And that tells you, I believe, that they didn't have the facts on their side. And in terms of the points that Steve made, they had no refutation for those facts, because there is no refutation for those facts. What Steve said was true. And he could have even gone further and pointed out that last June, the Iranians were negotiating in good faith, and out of the blue, the Israelis attacked them, and then we attacked them. And then this February, on February 28th, the Iranians were negotiating again in good faith, and we, not them, started a war. We attacked them. We tried to decapitate and succeeded at decapitating the regime. So the idea that the Iranians are these sort of mindless aggressors who are constantly starting wars and doing all these evil things against the good guys, Israel and the United States, is, as both of you know, a laughable argument.
Yeah, I was watching the full debate this morning. I haven't quite gotten all the way through it, but one of the things that I thought was really noteworthy is, you know, your two neocon opponents. Victoria Nuland doesn't even support the war with Iran. So clearly she thinks this is not going well. And Pompeo does support it, but he believes that we're right now in a very poor position. Of course, his answer is we just need to do more war, and then that will work it all out. But to me, that was very telling that neither of them could really defend the, you know, current status quo and the level of disaster that the Iran war has created for the United States.
Yeah, I would also point out to you that Victoria Nuland made it clear that she disagreed with Pompeo when he, as Secretary of State, helped President Trump pull us out of the JCPOA.
Mm-hmm.
She said that we should have stayed in the JCPOA. She said it had flaws, but those flaws could have been fixed, and we should have used it as a foundation to build a better agreement. And that is actually a fundamental disagreement between the two of them. So I think it was quite clear that although they both agree on a lot of issues, they disagree on a number of important issues. With regard to the subject of Iran, there's no question that it's a disaster. We have no sort of theory of victory at this point. There's no strategy that anybody can point to that will allow us to pull our chestnuts out of the fire. And although Pompeo was a huge supporter of the Iran war, he wrote this op-ed for Fox News on February 28th that talks in very glowing terms about how the war is going to evolve and what a wonderful move it is by President Trump to start this war. Nevertheless, given how it's gone south, he has no way of fixing the problem. He has no solution.
Yeah, that was just the real. All they had was, well, that's why we have to do more. That's what it ultimately came down to. It was really ironic, I think, actually, to see them put in that position where ultimately neither could defend how disastrous the current status quo is. Obviously, Israel was something that was also hovering over the entire discussion, its own influence on the United States. Well, here we have a very recent comment from Ben Gvir of Israel. Can we put C2 up here just to get your reaction, sir? Here, Ben Gvir says, Israel will not allow Trump to make a deal with Iran. And this here you have a member of the literally Israeli government, of the security cabinet, saying that they will not allow the United States to pursue this deal with Iran in the midst of all of these negotiations and firing and continued alleged ceasefires. What do you make of that comment?
Well, it's very important to understand that the deal that will be cut, assuming we get a deal, will be a disastrous deal for Israel. Israel started this war with a number of goals. None of them have been achieved. And furthermore, Iran is going to end up controlling the Strait of Hormuz. And furthermore, it looks like, if the deal is cut, that Iran's economic future looks much brighter than its economic past. This is disastrous for Israel, and Israel wants to do everything it can to undermine the deal. This is why the Israelis are bombing away in Lebanon. This is the principal way they have of undermining any deal. And what Ben Gvir is basically saying is, we don't like the deal at all. It's disastrous from our point of view, and we will make sure there is no deal. And I think he is in effect saying that, we control the United States and we'll make it impossible for Trump to strike a deal.
Do you think that they will succeed in that? Not only do you have, escalated bombing in Lebanon, we can actually put this New York Times tear sheet up on the screen that the Lebanese are resigned to a long war. Even if the U.S. and Iran do make a deal, this is something that the Iranians have said from the beginning is unacceptable to them, that they want the war to end on all fronts. You also have Trump making some wild statements threatening to blow up the Omanis if they, do anything to have control or share control of the Strait of Hormuz. You have an entire neocon freakout here in the U.S. of all sorts of influencers, people who have, had the ear of the White House saying, no, you can't stop now. This would be too disastrous, etc. So do you think that we are close to some sort of, true conclusion to this war?
Well, you want to understand that we're talking first about getting a ceasefire in place and opening the straits. That's the first step in the process. And then once that's done, you'll have negotiations on the nuclear issue, on the Strait of Hormuz, on sanctions, on reparations, on missiles. There are just all sorts of issues floating around in here that have to be dealt with. A lot of moving parts, to put it in slightly different language. But up front, what we're trying to do now is just create a meaningful ceasefire. And that means, again, shutting down the war to include Lebanon and opening the strait. And the problem is that the Israelis do not want us to stop the war in Lebanon. And they don't want us to stop the war in Lebanon because they want to conquer territory in Lebanon. They want to defeat Hezbollah, but also because they see that as the ideal means for undermining any kind of agreement. And they don't want an agreement. The Israelis want to go back to the bombing campaign. They want the war to restart again in a meaningful way. And of course, President Trump doesn't want this at all. Trump wants to cut a deal. He understands that he has no theory of victory here, and he's got to cut a deal to put an end to this. But the Israelis want to prevent him from doing that. And Lebanon is the key lever that they have over him. And of course, they have the lobby and the war hawks in the United States who will back up Israel at every turn.
Yeah, Professor, one of the things that we were really shocked by this morning was this comment from Trump saying that he was threatening to blow up Oman if they do not abide by U.S. demands of opening the Straits of Hormuz. Let's take a listen. We'll get your reaction.
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody. It's international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
We'll have to blow them up. I mean, how is this going to affect our regional alliances?
We've done so much damage to our regional alliances already, number one. And number two, Trump just talks like this all the time, so that it's not as shocking as one would find it to be if, someone like President Biden or President Bush had said this. I mean, this is sort of par for the course for President Trump. So I think in the final analysis, it doesn't matter. The Omanis probably just rolled their eyes, just like everybody else in the United States and in the Gulf did. The fact is that we're in deep trouble in the Gulf. Before the war, on February 27th, it looked like we had a formidable alliance structure. We had bases all over the region, and our allies, our Gulf allies, all thought that we would provide security for them. They thought that our security umbrella that was over their heads was a reliable one. But the events since February 28th have shown that that was not the case, that the United States could not protect them, that those U.S. bases in the region were vulnerable, and that moving forward, they have to think seriously about how to provide for their own security and not rely on the United States in any meaningful way, because they have now seen what happened when they relied on the United States. They got clobbered. And there is always a threat these days that they'll be eliminated as functioning countries if the war really heats up and the Iranians go after their desalination plants and their energy infrastructure.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below.
Kofi, follow me.